Now, the reason why I'm not utilizing the names of people in my past, because it's not about a bashing session. It's about an opportunity for somebody to be blessed by the testimony. You know, I try to be honorable, but I try to be honest at the same time, because the way I do ministry now has everything to do with how I seen things done years ago. There's certain stances that I take now, in large part because of what I experienced. There's certain things that I will not allow myself to get caught up in for those exact same reasons. And if my pain can be your gain, then so be it. Hope you enjoy this segment.
If your God is dead, asleep, or on vacation, try ours.
Welcome to our world. We are CUMI. In future segments, we're going to do some preaching and teaching. I want to go back to a time in my life years ago. I currently live here in Louisiana, but there was a time and place where in my younger days I lived in New Jersey. That was a very painful time in my life as an adult. My father retired from the Air Force in New Jersey. I graduated from high school there. I became born-again believer, and I started working for a ministry. Now, I'm going to tell you in advance, there's other layers to the story that I've yet to discuss, or you know, I will not address that in this particular video. But I do want to talk about a time when I was working full-time for a ministry up there. I was there roughly 10-ish years and some change. Went there, left, came back for a brief minute, and then left again for good. In those early days, I remember when I started working there, we started doing a prayer ministry out of the basement of my pastor at that particular point. Now, I want you to understand that, like I said, I still try to give honor in regards to those things, but I do want to address my life in regards to that. There was times during the mid to late 80s where, particularly during the time when there was fall of ministers like Jim Baker and Jimmy Swaggart, that things were kind of tough to be working for the ministry at that time. And because I was working full time, I was working as a supervisor there for the prayer line. And, you know, but during that particular time, I didn't just handle prayer calls. Sometimes we did administrative stuff like fold letters, and we also did traveling, different things like that. But I went through periods of time where there were struggles there financially, and it affected my personal life in a lot of ways, you know. But I went through that time in my mid 20s, going into my 30s. Now, I'm going somewhere with this, and so I'm going to cut a long story short. I went through a period of time where my mindset from the way I was in my 20s started to change in my 30s. But this was the thing. You know, I went through a period of time that I should have made a move earlier, but between loyalty and also too, the fact that I had developed a mindset that I couldn't do better. Seriously. I ended up staying for a little while, but then a situation came about where I was called into the office and I was confronted about something and accused of something that wasn't true. So what I ended up doing is I lashed out, I lost my temper, I got fired. That probably was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. Now, I was out of work for about a week. And back in those days, people was using temporary agencies to get on, and people was using temporary agencies to qualify who worked for them too, to see if they would last. So I registered with a temporary agency, got hired on pretty much within a short period of time, and then I started working different jobs. And this was one of the things that I discovered. I didn't do nearly as much with these initial jobs as I did where I was working for the ministry. But they gave me a greater degree of appreciation for the little things I did. And that surprised me. Then I realized everybody was not like this. Now, I'm making a contrast between working with people who were supposed to be saved and going to church on a consistent basis. I found far more acceptance in people who was not professing salvation at all. And they was far, and these were people that was bosses and people that was, that were supervisors and stuff. And it struck me that they appreciated what I did. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't feel the same type of love and appreciation that I had been working for amongst people who said they was born again. And I'm going somewhere with this. Because at this stage of my life, I want to just be honest about a lot of things, because I endured a lot of pain in that other environment. So long story short, the certain jobs I did ended. Now, again, when some of the jobs I was on, unsaved people was acting like unsaved people, but you knew what you was getting. Finally, I ended up at a place called Arthur Schuman's. It's a cheese packing plant where I started to work in there temporarily. And then I had a chance to work around some people. Now, believe me, it was hard work. Dealing with pecorino cheese and Parmesan cheese and stuff like that. But then ultimately they hired me on, and I became part of the Teamsters Union and stuff, because here in Texas, here in Louisiana, I don't hear too much, or even when I was living in Texas, they didn't talk too much about unions. But there, at that particular time in life, unions were pretty strong. I worked for the Teamsters, I got hired on, and I learned, and then I worked around people who were not born again, but were searching for something. But I found them in a lot of cases to be far more loyal than the people that I was working with for the church. Now, this thing you got to take into consideration. They did act at times like people who were not saved. They talked certain ways, they cussed, they talked about different things, but they respected me as a minister and as somebody who was saved. And in some cases, they tried to look out for me, which was different than anything I expected, because again, I was expecting something from them, and I was pleasantly surprised. On the reverse side, I expected something from the people that I used to work with that was supposedly born again, and I got something different. I got disappointment. I was hurt so much during that time that even when I left New Jersey to go to Texas, I was still bitter and angry. But this is the thing. Me getting fired that first time was a blessing for this reason, because it put me in a position where I was able to work different places. And one, that I wasn't bad as people made me out to be. And two, I realized I could make it without feeling the stigma, because the idea was that when people would leave this place, they would immediately go down. And I'm just saying that, I'm just saying that transparently. I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just being honest about my testimony. Like I said, so long story short, I worked there for a while. Then I was asked to go back to the place that I left. But the idea was I was supposed to be taking on the same position that I had before. It turned out that only was the case for a short period of time. And then I ended up doing some of the same things that I hated. And then at that time, financially, things was going a certain way. And then I was called and asked if I could take a pay cut. Now, mind you, when I was working at the place at Arthur Schumann, I had benefits. I had my pay was steady, and I had respect. Now, again, I dealt with a few crazy people, but by and large, I knew I had loyalty there. I left that and went back. And when I was asked if I could take a pay cut, I would, I said, okay, but I would have to do something to supplement my income. They fired me the same day. And I went through a period of time when I got fired. I called the place that I worked back, and then they told me that I could come back within a week's time. But I went through a painful period during that week because things was a little bit tight. And then ultimately, I started going back, and then because of the way the union cycle was, I had to start back from I lost my seniority, but I was able to quickly, within a period of a few months, because of the fact that they do raises, on a consistent basis, I was able to get back some of what I had lost. But I learned a very valuable lesson during that time. Now, ultimately, the Lord would lead me to go to Texas from New Jersey. And I was still dealing with anger and bitterness from how I was treated. Now, mind you, I'm only telling you part of my story, because there were some other things that happened there that gave me a very bitter and bad taste in my mouth of living in New Jersey. Trust me, there's more to the story. But what I realize now, after all these years, is that those things, as painful as they was, pushed me to move. Had I not been fired, I would have never been pushed out there to see that I could actually make it beyond the stigma of staying in one place too long. And many people, they stay in places too long. And sometimes to be let go or to be laid off is actually a promotion. It's actually a promotion that gets you going in another direction, because many people, particularly when God's got his hand on you, you cannot stay the same way that you was. You cannot stay in the same place. You have to eventually move. Now, even though my mother and my grandmother and family on my mother's side lived in Port Arthur, it had been years since I had lived there. I went to visit the previous year, in 95, and it woke up some things in me, so ultimately I felt a leading of the Lord when I was away from all of this stuff. But from the time I got let go, the time went back to Arthur Schumann, the Lord was able to deal with me about moving from New Jersey to Texas. And from that point on, I moved, I left, and I got a brand new start. And it was the catalyst for a lot of things that was happening. It opened me up to a whole new world of life. And I really believe God's hand was in all of this for me. Now, the thing I had to do is I had to be honest with myself, because I was still dealing with a lot of anger and bitterness. I had to eventually let that go, because the anger and bitterness that I was experiencing caused me to be open to panic attacks, caused me to be open to stuff attacking my body. And even though I was technically a minister and was being used of God, I still had anger and resentment from how I was treated. Now, mind you, there's still more to the story that I have yet to tell you. But in regards to this, I wouldn't be where I am today if the things that appeared to be evil, if they had not happened to me. I wouldn't be here today in this situation right now. Now, mind you, I had to deal with the residue of the pain and the anguish that I faced in those years, because I felt I had given a lot of good years of my life to something. But at the end of the day, God has my life on a time clock. God has your life on a time clock. Many of you stay in places too long. Because many of us, even if it's a bad situation, tend to stay comfortable in bad places. And I'm going to say this, God's got more for you than for you to just settle. And for those of you, if you can gain anything from this, sometimes what seems like a demotion is actually a promotion. Oh, I want you to think about that. I mean, because in what I'm telling you right now is a message. But again, speaking from the standpoint of somebody my age now, all pain is not necessarily bad pain. Now, I'll tell you about some stuff at some point, but all pain is not bad pain, because sometimes things got to hurt enough to motivate you to move from beyond your comfort zone. But when I did leave New Jersey, my self-respect was where it needed to be. I knew that I could live beyond limitations. I knew that I could live beyond the opinions of people. And this is one of the things I also want to make the connection to. As a person who's supposed to be a born-again believer, what I have seen is that sometimes saying who you are and being who you are is not the same thing. I found working in an unsaved environment actually much more freeing than working in what was quote unquote a saved environment. Because the same people that was lying, cussing, sleeping around, backstabbing me and stuff like that, I had to go to the same church that they did and praise God with them. Imagine that. I was so traumatized during that time of my life. I said, how could people do certain things and then go to church and act like they didn't do anything? But now at my age right now, nothing surprises me. I do want to highlight those things. Oh my God. Because all of these things come into the testimony of who I am as an individual. I've dealt with a lot of betrayal. I dealt with a lot of things. But again, you get a good education being around people. Now, so again, I trust that somebody will be blessed behind what I'm saying right now. But I got a lot of more that at some point, as I feel the release, I'm going to share with you.
Please like and subscribe.
Welcome to our world. We are CUMI.